Wait, hold on. Why were people dick riding this so hard in 2015? Hi there, everyone. Welcome back to On the Flip Side. My name is Adam Shawwalker, your host, and today we're going to be checking out this new Suicide Boys album, Sing Me a Lullaby, My Sweet Temptation. New Orleans-based SoundCloud rap duo consisting of cousins Scrim and Ruby DeCherry are back at it again with this new project. 13 tracks, 36 minutes, nothing too crazy, nothing too ambitious or adventurous, just another collection of beats and words that at most points is fine, but is a far cry from a lot of their earlier material that I wouldn't necessarily say is better, but at least it felt a little bit more on the edge, a little bit more in vogue. But it's 2022, what does Suicide Boys really bring to the table in this market that is frankly oversaturated with SoundCloud rap, a lot of which is just direct rips and direct competition of Suicide Boys, and a large amount of that are not just rips, but indeed developments on the Suicide Boys formula. I personally was never super heavily into the boys here, as it were, but I knew tons of people that were just absolutely in love with the early Kill Yourself EPs. And I feel like a lot of that hype, or a lot of that status and elevation, was kind of dropped, or at least became a lot quieter after Suicide Boys put out their first official full-length studio album in 2018, I Want to Die in New Orleans. An album that, in my opinion, is a more focused project, and that kind of signaled to me that this was really a fundamental shift for Suicide Boys. At that point, they've really moved past being big in just the underground and have really truly entered the mainstream. And you could argue that that shift happened a little bit earlier too, but I think regardless, it is a bit of a detriment for this trap-heavy SoundCloud rap. For Suicide Boys to really hit it big, I think in 2018, I think that was a real sink or swim moment, because that's really about when we hit peak trap. And that to me has been becoming more and more evident since that point. 2020, they dropped their mixtape, Stop Staring at the Shadows. 2021, their second studio album, Long-Term Effects of Suffering, both of which back to back are slowly losing that cutting edge and that refinement that this group was really pretty well ahead of the curve for a long time. To me, Suicide Boys, for better or for worse, are one of the biggest influences in this shift towards trap being brought into every genre. I mean, just permeating music as a whole, and I'm not exactly stoked about it, but the influence that Suicide Boys and a lot of these SoundCloud rappers have had is undeniable. So what does Suicide Boys really have to offer in 2022? And the answer is really not much more than they did in 2021 or 2020 or even earlier. Front to back, these cuts are all totally middle of the road songs. To me personally, I'm not super stoked on anything here, but I also don't really hate this outright. It's just kind of a bland collection of tracks. Comparing multiple tracks off of this album, in fact, to other releases earlier in the Suicide Boys catalog really puts into perspective how little has really changed or developed on the writing end of things for this group. And with the exception of some slightly better production and maybe a little bit of a shift towards some little bit more lo-fi sounds, most of the songs here sound like they could have been on any other Suicide Boys release. Like I said before, I think we have reached peak trap. The thing that baffles me, though, is just how Suicide Boys, or really any of these remaining trap artists, have managed to keep cranking out new projects and new material when the majority of the material on any of these albums, and really in most of this genre, are incredibly one note. And I just don't really understand the creative drive for this sound at this point. I don't understand any of the muses here. Really, the only thing that I can really think of that is that Suicide Boys are either going to do is just crank out mediocre projects until they just milk as much money out of this as they can, or they have just kind of cornered some market of fans that are so hyper-focused on this sound that they'll just live on this forever. And I don't really see the latter as realistic, because the amount of vocal Suicide Boys fans that I've seen over the years just kind of continues to dwindle. And the trap rap stuff really bled into that sad boy and e-boy rap stuff, and now that era, that style, is hitting a point where I think people are viewing that sound and style visually and, sonically, they are seeing that in the same way that they saw, Scene Kids after like 2014, like the big hair and like the dyed crap everywhere and feathers and wristbands and all that, it's kind of going out of vogue in the same fashion. I think in the next few years, people are going to look back at this in the exact same way and just kind of, oof. So I wouldn't really call Suicide Boys dead in the water because they are clearly still going, but it's an aimless course that inevitably seems like it's going to just go in circles forever. Past all of that, I don't really have much to say about any of these individual tracks. They are all pretty unassuming and largely forgettable. I don't hate any of this material, but there are no scenarios that I can see myself in where I would revisit this project. If these guys are really going to get to a point where their music has some kind of longevity, they need to seriously reinvent the wheel because the system they have now is kind of just barely treading water, but this ship is going to be sinking soon. Sing Me a Lullaby, My Sweet Temptation is a pretty firm 4. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of this album in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe and check out my Instagram, my Reverb, and my Depop. Links to those are in the description below. Thank you all so much again, and we'll see you on the flip side.